Welcome back, and how are you today? This is Symbolic Reacts, and we're jumping right in. So today's video is going to be 10 God of War facts you probably didn't know from Gameranx. You should subscribe to Gameranx if you haven't already. It's a great channel. Anytime a new game comes out, I love to watch it, so it's honestly one of the best, if not the best. And honestly, God of War. Now, I'm not a God of War super fan, because I didn't play God of War 2018 until God of War 2022 came out. And I actually wouldn't touch Ragnarok until I played God of War 2018 completely through. But, so I'm not a super fan, but I love it. I love that game. Honestly, I'm surprised I hadn't played it, hadn't played any of the old ones. And, but gonna have to now. But so let's jump right into it. God of War facts you probably didn't know. Let's see if we didn't know them. But I did know, if Teal'c's in here, I'm definitely an SG-1 fan. So if one of them is that, I think I saw that in the thumbnail, that it's Teal'c. Obviously, we know it's Teal'c does the new voice. So that's definitely not going to surprise me if that's one of them.
But there's always a stone left unturned, at least until we're on the job. I'm Falcon, and today on
Hello, Falcon.
God of War facts. Number 10, the brand new God of War game, seen partly as a reboot, partly as a continuation, is significantly more mature, and also began development just as the director Cory Barlog.
I think honestly that's like it's really funny because I've never played any of the old God of War games, but I'd say that's my favorite parts of the first one and of Ragnarok is the parts where he talks about his past as the Greek god. You know, whether it's in Ragnarok where he starts, delving more into it, or the little bits in the first God of War where he kind of salts it in, just kind of a little dash here and there of that he was a god,
Not too hard to figure out the inspiration for the story, and he said that parenthood has driven him to re-examine himself. He said this: "I had this idea I didn't want to have kids until my career was at the right point, until we have a house, until we have savings of at least this much. None of that came true, it just happened. You can't plan these things. Kratos thinks he knows what he wants, but he's not really sure how to do it. It's a great concept, the character who doesn't really know how to deal with something. This is somebody who could take down a mountain-sized beast, but a conversation with his son is a challenge that he just can't overcome. Something that we take for granted is, for him..."
Well, we definitely know that about Kratos, right? Not much for talking. But that was kind of like Teal'c's character, too, in SG-1, It was like, he was known for grunting, Or very well.
Herculean. It's interesting also because his relationship with his son was affected by the crunch that is associated with a high-profile video game project. He often ended up working until 2 or 3 a.m. every day and didn't see his son as much as he wanted to, and he felt as if it caused a bit of an awkward rift, not unlike what Kratos and Atreus are going through. He said, "I'm trying to be better for my son and regretting every moment that I'm spending with him."
Wow, so if you think about it, it's almost like the real-life problems that he was having with his son, because I'd say that really kind of showed through to the game, where you really felt, the emotions between them, so wow, that really translated well.
No matter how good your job is, you're always going to have to put time into it that you can't get back elsewhere. And I think that anyone, parent or otherwise, can relate to that. Number 9, David Jaffe, the original creator of the entire series of God of War, was originally going to converge the entire story in God of War 3, in which the Norse gods and Egyptian gods would be at war with the Greek gods. It would have turned out that Kratos himself would have had counterparts in both Norway and Egypt, and they would have become the 3 wise men, which would have started all of the one religions. During the ending, you would have actually played as the 3 different wise men in an alternate
Although somehow
fashion, and they also would have...
Although somehow I don't see Kratos, bringing a gift to Jesus, boy, and giving him the gift. Like the 3 wise men with the gift. It's like, I don't see that, though.
Explain the Sphinx.
I think that's probably why they cut it.
Sphinx in Egypt as a monster that Kratos froze.
But I hope they do. I think it's a great idea. They should totally keep it. I hope the whole Ragnarok is the last one, because I still haven't finished Ragnarok. I'm close. Man, I really hope Kratos doesn't die at the end. I really hope.
With Medusa's head, and that Kratos would have ultimately sacrificed himself to live with his family in Hades. Now, there's a lot of people who think that this would have been a very controversial choice, and
I'm literally at the part where they're like telling you to finish up stuff with Atreus before you go see Freya again in Vanaheim. So I don't know what happens.
for all we know, it very well could have. It's an actually pretty interesting idea for the story, but the way they've actually set it up, I kind of like better. The sort of passing of an era transition to a new era type situation that God of War has sort of become, I think will ultimately long-term be a better direction for the series. That doesn't stop this from being a cool idea, though. Number 8, the series has had some very interesting voice actors through the years. For instance, the actor who played Hercules in the television series of Hercules. Kevin Sorbo also played Hercules in God of War 3.
Oh, really?
Another homage like this happened when they used...
Well, I know for sure the guy who does Count Dooku's voice was Zeus, because every time I hear Zeus, I'm like, Dooku? I'm like, that is definitely Dooku.
The actor who played Perseus in the original 1981 Clash of the Titans as Perseus in God of War 2. But it's not all homage. Some phenomenal actors that have careers outside of the games, like Michael Clarke Duncan, voiced other Greek gods such as Atlas, and Elijah Wood
such a good
played
voice.
Kratos' brother Deimos in 2 God
Really,
of War
Deimos?
games. The actor playing Kratos in the new game is Christopher Judge,
Yep.
and the decision to change actors was not just because of the voice, him being older, having a slightly different demeanor, those types of things, but also they really wanted somebody who could motion capture alongside a child and not have to adjust eye lines. So there's mechanical reasons as well. Christopher Judge is phenomenal as Kratos, by the way.
Yeah, he
Number
is.
7, I don't know if you've ever seen early concept art of Kratos, but it looks so different from what we eventually got, and I'm gonna have
wasn't
to
he
say
blue?
that although they look very cool, I'm much happier with the Kratos that we got. In a lot of ways, I feel like the art was inspired by 1990 cyberpunk quite a bit. Of course, melded with more classical elements, but they had a more distinctly post-apocalyptic...
Looks like Warhammer to me, something like that.
The Kratos we know and love today is, well, let's just say, pretty damn badass.
Right.
Also has a more distinctly Greek feel to him.
Yeah.
Number 6, David Jackson.
Well, it makes sense with him being a
wanted
Spartan.
to have a fairy companion similar to Navi in Legend of Zelda.
And also, that's like a perfect, I think also, too, a perfect starting point for, like, the whole mortal becomes a god, like a Spartan. I mean, it may just be me, but I think that's perfect. I think it works, you know?
Who would accompany Kratos very briefly through the first level, and in a commentary of other video games of the time, Kratos would get annoyed with the fairy and kill it. They scrapped it, I think ultimately because the fairy wasn't annoying enough in Ocarina of Time for people to truly hate it, and might have taken it as a slight towards Zelda. But honestly, I think it was pretty funny and would have taken it as an homage personally. Number 5, on the remastered version on PS4, Sony censored some of the trophy names containing innuendos and replaced them with still slightly suggestive titles, but not quite as. For instance, the trophy called Are You Horny to Win was changed to Horn of Plenty. The trophy Hooker was changed to Depths Below. Also, the trophy I Didn't Do It, But I Wish I Did, which is awarded for killing the Poseidon Princess, was removed entirely because they didn't want to suggest that beating women should be rewarded. I kind of support this personally because those things feel embarrassing.
Right.
Back on. I gotta laugh the first time around from these titles, but...
And that was kind of like a, that really became like a, I wonder who started that. Was that Bungie or... Because I know that from experience. Like, you know, Bungie always had great titles for whether it was like, you know, missions or achievements. So that kind of became like a cool little creative thing, you know.
To be able to enjoy with little falcons later on, and I'd like to avoid any awkward conversations, instead just focusing on the badass games themselves. Number 4, there's a pretty intense Easter egg at the end of God of War on PS2. You see, there's a couple of statues at the end, And if you attack them, it seems like you're just attacking them for no reason. Like, there's nothing to indicate that they're special or that continuing to attack them
Is that the
matters in some
museum?
way.
Is this
but
the
if you
museum
hit them
one?
several hundred times, they actually break and give you a code. If you decode that code, it reveals that it's a 1-800 number, which you can call and hear a conversation with Kratos and
Where he
David
calls
Jaff,
you
the
boy.
game's director, who eventually gets killed by an impatient Kratos, with the call ending and everyone wondering why such an elaborate Easter egg was done in the first place, other than, hey, it must have been fun. Number
I
3,
think it was
director
just
of
the
God of
time
War
period,
3's
because probably when that came out, that was like, I remember there used to be this thing that you could do with the phone where it was like snakes on a plane. It was for the movie, but you could have it send it to like somebody's phone, and it would be a recorded message of Samuel L. Jackson. So I think it was just that time period. That was like a cool new thing that they could do, just for promo, like marketing for games or movies.
Stig Asmussen revealed that originally, when trying to do the sex minigame in the game a second time, the camera would pan out, a record scratch sound would happen, and the camera would pan back to the bed. Aphrodite would try to kill Kratos with some daggers hanging above the bed, and a quick time event to boot her down into Hades would have been triggered. They eventually decided against this, however, and I think, yeah, it makes sense, because the sex minigame is kind of a distraction as it is. Number 2,
And right,
director
like, yeah.
Corey Barlog, who's
Plus, it might bump you up like a
isn't the only
MSRP or
person
something.
in his family to have written something that people
Rating.
are very fond of. His father, James Barlog, is also an award-winning author, penning a series of books about 2 young girls who are whisked.
That's so cool too that like their name could also be rearranged to Balrog. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Way into a magical land, as well as a number of young adult
You
horror
shall
It's
not
probably safe to say there was
pass.
some input he offered on the new game as well as all the previous ones, so it's kind of a cool little tidbit to know. He probably did have some influence from other creative people in his family. And finally, number 1, both David Jaff and Corey Barlog said that they did not view the second God of War game as a sequel, but a specific continuation of the first game. Sort of like an
Okay.
expansion pack, but not really, because they wanted people not to think of it as an expansion pack, but more as another chapter. Now, in a lot of circles, that's called a sequel, but I can understand where they're coming from, because it is very much literally as if the game simply continues, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually a pretty good thing. And they released it on the PlayStation 2 instead of the PlayStation 3.
I mean, honestly, I have a thing about that. Why? What was ever wrong with that? I don't think every time. I mean, if it's gonna be like years and years in between, then yeah, sure, update stuff. But I definitely think sometimes, certainly with like old PC gaming, expansion packs and all that stuff was popular. So, it's always cool to just add more game instead of always having to. Basically, if it works, if it's not broken, don't fix it. That whole thing, that adage. Because honestly, I mean, I could have gotten another game like God of War 2018. But honestly, the things I think bothered me at first in God of War Ragnarok don't bother me as I kept playing. So.
Despite the PlayStation 3 being out, because they wanted to make sure all 100 million people who played the first God of War would be able to play the second. Given the PlayStation 3 also had PlayStation 2 backwards compatibility, they weren't too worried about people who had bought a PlayStation 3 being able to play it. That's only the tip of the iceberg of the various things we know about God of War, both in-world and out. Given the direction of the new game, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of brand new, interesting tidbits of both lore and behind-the-scenes stuff. So anything you find interesting, let us know in the comments. If you like this video, please click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload
Another great video from them.
every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is...
Alright, well there you go. That was another Symbolic Reacts video. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.